There are some films that don't just entertain you. They they get under your skin, burrow into your brain and just stay there. They leave you feeling unsettled for days or weeks, maybe even forever. Today we're going to dissect the anatomy of these films, the documentaries that are engineered to be truly unforgettably disturbing. So, let's get right into it. What is it really that makes a documentary so profoundly disturbing? It's not always about just showing shocking or graphic stuff. The real secret sauce is way more complex, and it touches on everything from history and psychology to the very nature of trust itself. So here's how we're going to break it down. We're going to look at four key themes. First, the raw horror of real, documented history. Then, the incredibly personal pain that comes from a betrayal of trust. After that, we'll look at the wounds that society tries to pretend aren't there. And finally, we'll talk about the dilemma we all face as the ones who watch. First up, let's talk about the big one, history. These are the films that get their power from the sheer, undeniable reality of human atrocity. They force us to look at huge, world-changing events that, honestly, most of us would rather forget. A perfect and pretty controversial example is a film called Africa a Dio. For 3 straight years, the filmmakers were on the ground, capturing the incredibly violent and chaotic end of colonial rule in Africa. They filmed things the rest of the world never saw, like the mass killings during the Zanzibar Revolution. In fact, it's pretty much the only footage of that event that even exists. And the film just throws this number at you to try and make sense of the horror. It reported that 18,000 Watusi people were killed in Rwanda in just 2 months. It's a staggering figure, and it's meant to confront you head-on with the sheer scale of the violence. But here's where it gets really complicated. It wasn't just what the film showed, it was how it showed it. You'd see these horrific scenes, rebels executing people, poachers slaughtering baby elephants. And all the while, the narrator is speaking in this cold, emotionless tone. That detached style is what led critics like Roger Ebert to call the film racist and exploitative, arguing it just framed Africans as savages and didn't give any real context. All right, let's pivot to another historical film that just ignited a firestorm, The Soviet Story. Its core argument is, well, it's incredibly controversial. It doesn't just show Soviet crimes, it actually argues that there was a direct ideological connection and even cooperation between the Nazis and the Soviets before World War II. And you can imagine the reaction was completely split down the middle. On one hand, supporters praised it for finally shedding light on atrocities like the Holodomor famine and the gulags. But on the other hand, critics, including some of the very historians they interviewed for the film, said it was politically biased, that it massively oversimplified history, and that it twisted their words to fit a pre-made narrative. Okay, so we're going to shift gears now. We're moving from the huge scale of history to something much more intimate. But honestly, no less horrifying. This is about the betrayal of trust. That feeling when the very people and institutions that are supposed to protect you are secretly the ones causing the harm. You can see this exact theme play out in 2 incredible films. In Three Identical Strangers, the betrayal comes from scientists. In Our Father, it comes from a doctor. In one case, you have triplets who were secretly separated at birth as part of a hidden experiment. In the other, a fertility doctor deceives his patients in a way that is just profound. And when you dig into the experiment in Three Identical Strangers, it's chillingly methodical. This wasn't random. The researchers deliberately placed each of the identical triplets into families with different socioeconomic backgrounds, one poor, one middle class, and one wealthy, all just to study nature versus nurture, without anyone ever knowing or consenting. Then you have Our Father, where the scale of the betrayal is just hard to wrap your head around. It took at-home DNA tests decades later for people to discover that a fertility doctor named Donald Klein had secretly fathered at least 94 children by using his own sperm with his patients. He just completely shattered dozens of family histories. All right, for our next theme, we're looking at those horrors that are kind of hiding in plain sight. They're happening in the forgotten corners of our own societies. These are the films that shine a light on the invisible wounds carried by people who are living on the margins. So take the film Children Underground. It just follows 5 homeless kids who are surviving in the subway system of Bucharest. And what makes this one so gut-wrenching is the way it's filmed. There's no narrator, no expert interviews, nothing. The camera just silently watches as these children beg, fight, and sniff paint to escape their reality. You are completely immersed in their world. The really heartbreaking part is that the tragedy doesn't just stop when the credits roll. For most of these kids, the cycle just continued. Christina stayed addicted and eventually lost her own children. Mihai went right back to the streets, and we don't even really know what happened to Macarena. It's just a devastating portrait of how easily society can forget its most vulnerable people. Okay, and then there's a film that documents a subculture that is so shocking, it's almost hard to believe it's real. It's called The Gift, and it explores the world of bug chasing. This is a community where some men actively try to get infected with HIV because they see the virus not as a terrible disease, but as a gift. And the whole time you're watching, you're just asking, why? Why would anyone do this? And the film gives you this heartbreaking answer from one of the men, Doug. He says his motivation wasn't about self-destruction, it was about a desperate need to belong. He sought out the virus simply to feel accepted and loved within that community, which just reveals this incredibly deep, disturbing psychological pain. So, all of this leads to our final section, and it's a big one. We kind of have to turn the camera back on ourselves. What is the point of showing all of this shocking stuff? And maybe, more importantly, what does it mean to be the person who chooses to watch it? And to really get this, you have to know about a specific genre called the Mondo film. Basically, these are shock documentaries. Their one and only goal is to get a huge emotional reaction out of you. And this is key, they often staged or exaggerated scenes to do it. Factual accuracy really took a backseat to pure, unadulterated shock value. The granddaddy of them all, the one that kicked off this whole genre, was a film from 1962 called Mondo Cane. That translates to A Dog's World, and it was a global sensation. It was basically a whirlwind tour of the most bizarre and taboo rituals they could find from all over the world, all of it designed to leave the audience completely stunned. And its main trick, its signature move, was this wild use of juxtaposition. The film would show you something serene, like a pet cemetery in California, and then immediately cut to pigs being brutally beaten to death in New Guinea. And the craziest part, it's all set to this beautiful, sweeping, romantic theme song, which just makes the violent images feel even more surreal and disturbing. So when you pull back and look at all these films, what's the common thread? Whether they're showing you real history, a personal betrayal, or even staging scenes just for shock value, their real power comes from making us look at things we would much rather ignore. They forced us to confront these really uncomfortable truths about our world, our institutions, and yeah, about ourselves. Which leaves us with a really tough, and I think a really important final question. When you choose to sit down and watch one of these documentaries, what is your role in that moment? Are you being an informed observer, someone who is bearing witness to difficult but important truths? Or is there a line? Is there a point where bearing witness just becomes consuming someone else's pain for entertainment? That's something only you can answer for yourself.